Okay. Oops. Alright, so I'm going to respond to this list of comments I've not had time to respond to. I should really prepare for this a bit more because I always struggle to find them. Right, okay, I think this is it. So I'm just going to go from the top down. I don't know what sort of order that is in. But that's just the way it's appearing, so. Also my eyesight's terrible, so I'm going to need to squint to see this tiny writing. So, Gypsy Moth says, hey, if you can't capitalise on your enlightenment, then what's the point? Right? 100% agree. This isn't going very well. Okay, so Emily, my wife's name, says, hi David, I just want to thank you for your videos. They are wonderful. I wondered if you had any tips for dealing with pretty extreme mental pain. There's not that much on what to actually do, though I realise itself trying to do anything is also futile. But I think you can see there is a fine line. I really need to put my glasses on. That can be talked about between the two. You said in one video to pay attention to what is present before thought. Anything else to deal with what seems like unbearable mental and emotional turmoil? ? Many thanks. Please keep up the work. Also, if you're wondering why I've got a jacket on in the house, it's because the house is freezing. I'm also slightly out of breath because I just ran down the road. So the mental and emotional turmoil, pain. I'll just describe my own experience with this because really that's all I can do. That's all this ever is filtered through the lens of experience in terms of the communication. So what was noticed was the seeming connection between emotions and thought. So the mind, the mental, like you expressed, the mental turmoil, the mental pain. What was exposed kind of early on was the link between the two, or the seeming link between the two. And there seemed to be a disconnection. There seemed to be a disconnection from the emotions and the thoughts that seemed to be clustered up or intertwined with the emotions. Did I say emotions or thought there? I'll say that again. The thoughts that seem to be intertwined with the emotions. So in the beginning it seems like this, it seems like psychological emotional pain, as in one experience of thoughts mixed up with narrative, mixed up with emotion. And through some inquiry, it kind of became clear that the narratives, the thoughts, the relation from a position of separateness was I'm going to say perpetuating or congealing that experience of a very physical experience of emotion, that very energetic experience of pain. It was kind of like the experience or the appearance of sensation, this being the movement of emotion. It's kind of like that contextualized into my experience, meaning something, my experience as caused by this external reason, as it relates to me and mine, my experience of pain, my narrative that gives that pain value, gives that pain a narrative, a story, ownership. That seemed to perpetuate, I think, what you're describing. I think what you're describing is psychological suffering. And the psychological suffering isn't so much to do with thought, isn't so much to do with emotion. It's this process of identification that congeals those experiences into something I relate to as a separate subject of experience as I move through time, as I move through a separate world. That's a lot of words, sorry, it makes it sound really complicated when I explain this or try and explain this in language. But it seems to be that identification, that this experience is mine, this emotion is mine, these thoughts are mine. And these are caused by, or these mean something, or they're caused by circumstances external to me as I relate to them, as a separate thing moving through a separate world. That seems to be the basic function behind the psychological suffering, the energetic experience of suffering. And I think that's what you're describing. I could be wrong, but I think that's what you're describing. I get the sense that you're describing that. I'm gonna have to look at the thing again because I've forgotten. Yeah, what to do. So the problem or what seems to generate that experience of suffering is the subject that the experience belongs to, the thinker, the feeler, the separate person, the separate individual, discrete entity that exists here, separate from this world out there, separate from the experience of emotion, such that it can add value to that, separate to the experience of thought, such that it can add value to that, be averse to it, to certain thoughts or certain emotions, and be inclined towards, in preference or desire towards, apparent pleasant thoughts, pleasant experiences, pleasant emotions. And the self-inquiry process that I always talk about seems to be, I did a video called This is the Key to Awakening, and tried to describe a kind of practice that can clarify the illusory nature of this separate subject of experience. It's very hard to give, like, this is not something that you can give a set of instructions on and say do this and then this will result in this. That's the weird thing about it. It's very intuitive. You kind of need to feel your way through it, and that's what this pointing thing's all about. Because aside from the words, aside from the descriptions, there's like what's being described as a resonance, something that can be felt, something that makes sense on a level that doesn't feel familiar to the mind, that seems kind of elusive and vague to the mind, to the separate subject. The separate subject can even be averse to it, can even seemingly actively try and avoid what I'm pointing to, because this function wants to perpetuate itself, not like it has will. It's so automatic, so well practiced, that it just rolls on as a habit, as a pattern. And this self-inquiry thing is all about breaking that pattern, breaking that habit, breaking that cycle of going back into identification. And all of that happens now. All of that happens with one thought. All of that happens with the arising of clarity, such that it can dispel this fundamental illusion. The illusion that being that I am a me, separate from this world, moving through the world as a separate thing. I am a thinker in here, separate from my thoughts. I am an experiencer, separate from the experience of, say, in this case, emotion. Anything that resonates with you, and it might not particularly be these videos, anything that thins that illusion, that you can feel some clarity, you can feel that thing that I described, but you can just feel it, you just intuit something about this. You're like, I know that, I know what that is. Part of me knows what that is. And it's not the thinking mind, because the thinking mind just gets confused by it, or covers it up, or, you know, creates another fixation, or so on and so on. If I say frequently, the thinking mind can't think about this. So, like you said, before thought, beyond thought, that which is prior to thought, that which is too close to, prior to primary, upon which all thoughts appear, let's say, or that, if that resonated with you, that space in which all thoughts appear that is there in the absence of thought as well. I've done a few videos pointing at the thinker, the assumed subject separate from experience, separate from thoughts. That's the illusion. And it won't be confirmed by, it's a position, it's a kind of positional illusion. It's a position that assumes itself to be separate from the thoughts, experiencing the thoughts, separate from the emotions, experiencing the emotions, such that it can form values and relate to them, such that it can form positions to separate from them, because it might not be deemed as comfortable. But it's an assumption. When you really look, you don't find it. All you find is the experience, all you find is the emotion, all you find is the thought. But don't take that as a conclusion. Look and find out for yourself. The thinker will never be found set other than a thought. Other than just a thought. But it's that position, it's that me, it's that one that relates to whatever the object of attention, the object of relation is. That's the illusion. If you can look there, if you can really look there, and that's easier said than done. And it does feel like a doing at the start. Thing is, I can't really tell you how to do that. There's no like roadmap. I have a lot of videos where I've pointed at this. Don't know if they're effective or not. But I would say if you watch these videos and you feel it, so you go along with the bits of practice that is in there, like the self-inquiry thing. The noticing of a thought as such, as one thought now, and then the noticing of the thought as such, as one thought now, directing attention to a thought as it appears in, say, real time, in experience. When we're not rolling with the content of thought, that turning around and noticing a thought as a thought seems to just stop that pattern for a time, for what might seem like a brief moment in the beginning. But through practice of that I describe it as a space opening up. People often describe it as a stillness. In that stillness, something comes through, something very subtle at first comes through, and it's not like it's something that's not here already. It's more of a thinning of that which seems to be obscuring it. It gets very paradoxical. And that which seems to be obscuring it is this assumption that seems to be tied up with thought. So in my experience, when the thought subsided, the emotion was still present. But it seemed like that function of identification, when that subsided to an extent, there was almost nothing avoiding or reasoning with or adding value to the emotions, and it seemed like only then the emotions had the freedom I don't know if this is a good way to describe it, the freedom to move without obstruction, without resistance, without aversion. And it turns out the aversion to the thoughts, the separation from the thoughts, the emotions, the aversion from the emotions, this goes for thoughts as well, the assumption of separateness, of holding a position separate from the emotions, or avoiding the emotions, was what was making the emotions into suffering, because it's a form of resistance. When there's nothing separate from the emotion, all there is the emotion. And the emotion isn't inherently problematic, isn't inherently bad or good. It's just an experience. And as the experience, it just moves without obstruction, without what turns out to be a futile attempt to control in the first place. And there's a release in that. There's a lack of, or an absence of resistance to experience that seems to change everything. And it turns out that what seemed to be generating the suffering in all this was a strange assumption that had never really been looked at, that had never really been noticed or paid attention to. And whatever means that you can find initially to direct attention towards that assumption, towards that energetic tendency, towards that feeling, has the potential to bring about this surrender, bring about this release. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how to do that because I think it's different for everyone. But if you find something that resonates with you, and I think everyone's a little bit different with this, then intuitively move with that, with openness, with kind of relaxed attentiveness. Without a huge amount of expectations or pre-assumptions about the way this is going to go or why you're doing this. Like I said, there's a feeling here. It's not so logical, it's more intuitive. There's a felt level to this, which starts off quite subtle. As the thoughts die down, or as that rolling on of the patterns of the mind, the patterns of relation, as that kind of subsides a little bit, it becomes more overt. And like I say, with this recognition, once you taste it, once you say connect with it or feel it, then it's just that all the way. It's as simple as that. What makes it seem complicated is relation, thought, the relative position, conceptual understanding. If you can feel past that, then you're on the right path. Oh, already 25 minutes in, and that's only like one thing. Right, let's move on. When you say everything's perfect, is that another way of... Oh, sorry, One Party Relay says, when you say everything is perfect, is that another way of saying that there's just no resistance to what appears in experience? Yeah. Or is there a discernment that is still making a judgment about better or worse conditions, and your conditions feel optimal at the moment? No, I would say the first one. I find it easy to accept what is when I feel safe and I know my loved ones are okay. Yeah, but it's hard for me to imagine having no resistance to any scenario. I'm still too attached to outcomes to feel that kind of freedom, right? So, and then Do You Hope says, this is a response to this comment. It says, how you feel right now is the freedom and the perfection. It's less to do with outcomes and more about resting where you are. Yeah, because you always are where you are. So this is one where we're going to struggle with language, right? I would say it's more like you could, of course, the rational mind can't see this, so as I always say, it's not going to make sense from any position. You mentioned like a position of discernment. It's not going to make sense to the mind, but I would kind of describe it like this is the way it is, which isn't really any way. It just is, and it couldn't be any other way. Of course it couldn't be any other way, because this is how it is. And in that there's a release, there's a surrender, and like you said, a relinquishment of the need to resist experience from a position. When there's only the experience, it is how it is, and that's it. And it's clear that it couldn't be any other way. And it isn't. Not now, it's too immediate. That's how I would describe it. And it's perfect because it has to be. Not because there's a relational position separate from it, making a discernment about it. It's perfect because this is the only thing. This is all there is. So there's nothing else to be more perfect than this. That's kind of how I would describe it. But that doesn't mean that I'm fully capable of saying something's shit, but there's no weight in it. There's no urgency or yearning, because it's clear that this is how it is. And if it happens to be shit, then it's just shit, but that's also perfect. So there's, for example, right, so if you experience, the body experiences pain, there will be a natural aversion to that and a natural action that comes as a response in a biological sense, in and as the environment from that experience. But it doesn't need a mental narrative or a relational character to contextualize it all for the natural movement that comes from that experience to happen, for the doing, The one doing doesn't need to exist for the doing to happen. It just happens. So you know what's weird about this, right? I have and always have had really bad misophonia. If you don't know what that is, look it up. So this whole awakening thing, this whole recognition thing, hasn't changed that at all. It seems to be something that's wired in at a biological level, and I don't know if that will change or who knows, but even as the experience of sound, as that appearance appears, and it is clearly, its nature is clearly non-dual, and thus perfection, that doesn't stop a natural aversion to that sound. That doesn't stop this non-dual appearance moving the way it does. That doesn't stop this body moving away from a particular sound. That's not changed. So it turns out that wasn't anything to do with an internal narrative or a character. It's just something that seems to be hardwired into this biological system, into nature, and that hasn't changed, and I don't know if it will ever change. But there's no narrative that is or character that's attached to an outcome that needs it to change. So it's not problematic. It's not problematic. It's only problematic when there's something separate from it to resist it, and this separate position inherently seems to resist. Its very apparent existence seems to be a resistance. So the resistance doesn't really go away until that position is gone. That position of discernment is gone, and it doesn't need to be a cognitive discernment for there to seemingly be a discernment spontaneously arise from conditions. I hope that makes sense. I don't have a clue what I just said, so hopefully that makes sense. So, Peniac says, thanks David, love your perspective. I'm going to polish my crystal and put it on my shelf structure. One party relay said, I wish I had a structure to put my crystal on. I got rid of mine after deciding to be less shellfish. I'm still shellfish with a wonky shelf structure. Yeah, if you build your shelves, don't build your shelves on sand, otherwise your crystals may wash into the ocean. So I would say to that. Where are we now? Okay, Sue Sullivan says, so appreciative. The recognitions here are subtle but accumulating, and seem to have a momentum. Yeah, and it's all good. I frequently have thoughts wondering where I am in this process and wondering how I can have aha moment recognition, and pointings that seem further down the path, inverted commas, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, the aha moment is perpetually happening to an infinite degree right now. Such a high frequency that there isn't any definition between one aha moment and the next. So the universe is infinitely recognizing itself just as this. That's the recognition. So it's not something that happens in time, as I always say. So yeah, you're 100% right. The aha moment is this. It's always right here, and it's always happening, such that it doesn't even need to happen. So right, I'm just gonna So Jalajah. I'm just going to spell them out so that I don't mispronounce them and people make fun of me. So I'm finding it so amazing and magical that here I am, an elderly lady living in upstate New York. Cool. And I'm connecting with in such a profound way with this guy from Scotland, is it? Yeah. I'm from Scotland, but I live in Ireland now. Wherever, I absolutely love your videos and the silence within them. I'm very grateful for the technology that supports this transmission. I have a question about transmission. Experience is a very real thing. But how can that be if there's already no separation between us? Yeah, paradox. So I'm responding, right? So I'm responding to your comment, right? Just now, apparently. But there are other people listening to this that are listening to the same words. So who am I actually talking to, if anyone? And is there actually anyone here talking to you? Is there? What is that? So someone other than yourself listening to this, or yourself listening to the other comments that I responded to, apparently talking to an individual. What makes it seem like I'm a guy here talking to someone who I've never met directly on this? What makes it seem like that is a person talking to another person? What makes it seem like you listening to this, you're hearing this as a you from another you over here, from a me over here? What makes it seem like that? Because that's actually not happening. I'm not actually talking to anyone. Like, what is going on? What is that? That's kind of what I'm pointing to. So at one relative level, there seems to be a transmission, but the transmission is based on an assumption that there are separate things, there are separate people, and the message and the transmission separate from you that you're like absorbing and is being passed out from a position over here. But is any of that actually happening? And what makes it seem like that's the case? But you're right, there is no transmission, but there kind of seems like there is. It's a good one to look into, because I always say that if you're watching these videos, then it's not me talking to you, it's you, the awakeness, you, the universe, talking to yourself. So really there is no distance, there is no separateness, there is no message, there is no transmission. There's just an appearance, there's just an expression. And this appearance, this expression seems to have the ability to direct, let's say, what seems like attention towards something. But that in itself is an illusion. That anything you gain from this, hearing these videos, watching this, you're giving to yourself. In fact, you don't even need to give it to yourself because it's already inherent. Everything else is an illusion. So when we think about things a little bit differently, because there's an assumption here that says, I ask a comment and then David talks to me, but that's just a story, that's just it can get very subtle, it seems very real when it gets very subtle because it's just assumed, it's just there, it's just the assumption that colours this appearance with assumed separation. But when we actually look at that in a different way, we see that, oh yeah, that's That's not actually happening. What's happening now? There is an appearance. There are sounds. Are the sounds separate from the what's apparently seen? Can we find a division? Can you find a division between yourself and this sound that David, through this device, apparently is making at a different time? Is this a different time? This was filmed prior, apparently. Is that actually the experience? So am I talking to you now, or am I talking to you from the past? What is that? What's going on here? So, you see, it gets so paradoxical that then we just have to take this appearance for what it is now and forget the rest, because the rest is added to, and it just confuses things, if you see what I mean. But yeah, you're right, it is amazing that we have these resources now. And it's amazing there are so many people that are interested in this, that are, quote, lay people, that aren't monastic or are living normal lives. And it's becoming more and more apparent that it doesn't have to be a certain way for this recognition to clarify, for this, what is talked about in the traditions, to become let's say an ongoing experience, an ongoing clarity. But thanks for the comment. Okay, this is turning out to be a very long video, but that's okay. I think we're done. Phil Much Better says, laugh out loud, namaste. And Cleo, I think, says, love your videos, thank you. Thank you. I think that'll do us. So thanks for the comments, and I'll talk to you next time. Alright, so I just filmed this video and I realised that someone asked for practice, and I don't think I gave one, so we'll start with this. So bring your attention into this present moment, into this immediate experience, this immediate appearance, here, now, this immediate experience of aliveness, experience of awakeness, of presence, of existence. And then ask yourself, what will be the next thought? And then watch. So, a thought may appear that refers to some objective reality, that refers to my life, the world, past, future. Notice that as a thought. That thought assumes something. Any thought that refers to an objective experience assumes within it the existence of a separate subject of experience. A thinker, an experiencer, a me. Now stop. What will be the next thought? When you notice a thought appear, notice it as such. That's a thought. See how when we notice it directly, when we direct our attention to the thought as it appears now, when it's noticed, it seems to dissolve. Now, what is it that's noticing the thought? Do you feel like you are noticing this thought as a something separate from the thought? Is this thought noticed by you? What is that? Look at that and see if that is anything other than another thought. A very subtle assumption that we are looking from a position separate from the experience of a thought. Find if that position actually exists, other than one thought that appears now. What will be the next thought? When the thought appears, is noticed as such. Move into the thought experience fully. Move into the space fully. Relax. Dilate the attention fully. When the next thought appears, what does it suggest? That I'm a thinker watching the thought, separate from it? Is that in the thought? Is that an assumption? See if you can find that position. See if you can relax that assumption that I'm doing this, I'm noticing this, I'm thinking this. When this subsides, there will be no position separate from the experience that's capable of confirming it as the absence of the thinker. So this requires complete immersion into the space, let's say. Complete immersion into the experience of thinking. Such that we don't need to assume ourselves to be separate from it in order to understand it, relate to it, and confirm it as absence of thought. Funnily enough, absence of thought doesn't require a thinker, doesn't require another thought. This is as far as I can describe this, because after this, the experience becomes so paradoxical, it's impossible to talk about. Anything I say would be imputing the existence of a separate subject of experience, confirming the existence of the assumption that we make that I'm that which notices thought, separate from it. I am that which confirms this experience as thinking. What is thought in the absence of that assumption? What is thought without the implied existence of the one which it refers to? These thoughts seem like they are pointing out at an experience in the world, in past and future. When we look at the thought, there's still a pointing out there, but this time it's pointing at the thought experience. What's one step back from that? What doesn't need to point out at a thought experience and objectify it as something with value, something that comes and goes, something with inherent existence, distinguishable from any other experience as it relates to me, the one at the centre of it, the one separate from it. This is going to sound very weird and vague, but if you can kind of feel what I'm talking about, if you can just move your attention initially to what will be the next thought, and when it comes up, notice it as such, and then dilate the attention. Don't resist the thought. Don't try not to think. Just notice. Just keep noticing until noticing isn't required anymore.